Hello, and welcome to this DCS tutorial on custom livery creation. In this video, we will be covering folder structure, description files, texture templates, exporting DDS files, as well as a quick look at the DCS model viewer and how it can aid you in livery creation. However, before we get started, there are some things you will need. First, you will need a graphics editor capable of editing PSD files as well as exporting DDS files. I will be using Adobe Photoshop, but I know of many people that use GIMP, a free alternative, for the same process. As for DDS exports, you will need a plugin to export your texture file as a DDS file. The two main ones out there are NVIDIA Texture Tools and Intel TextureWorks. In this tutorial, I will be using the NVIDIA Texture Tools exporter. You will also need a text editor capable of editing Lua files. Notepad++ is my go-to for this. It's free and it's powerful. And finally, you will need to have DCS installed. I will be working with the open beta standalone release. Now, let's set up our folders. DCS will require a specific folder name for your livery. Depending on which module you are working on will depend on where you can find that folder name. For newer modules, you can find them in your DCS install directory /core mods /aircraft, the name of the module you are working on /liveries. And for older modules, you can find them in your DCS install directory /bazaar /liveries. Within these locations, you can see the exact name you will need for your livery folder. In our example, it is the F-16C_50. Now we will navigate to our DCS saved games liveries folder. If the liveries folder does not exist, you can create it. Once you are in the liveries folder, create another folder with the exact name we just found. In our example, it was F-16C_50. And finally, within this folder, create another folder with the name of your livery. In my example, I will be naming it 421st FS Hill Air Force Base, or AFB. This folder is where our description file will go, and it is where we will be saving our exported texture files. I also recommend pinning this folder to the quick access of Windows. This will allow us to quickly navigate to it throughout the livery creation process. Now that our folder structure is set up, let's get a description file for our livery. There are two ways to go about this. The simplest method is to simply copy one of the DCS default liveries that came with your DCS module. Usually, these are sufficient for basic livery creation. However, if you need a full description file, you can generate one from the model viewer. With that being said, let's go ahead and set up the DCS model viewer. By default, the DCS model viewer will not be looking in your DCS Save Games livery folder, so we will need to edit its autoexec file. Navigate to your DCS install directory /config /model viewer folder. Within this folder, open the autoexec Lua file. There's a lot you can do within this file, but for now we are only interested in adding one line to it. At the very top of the document, add the line you see on screen now with the modifications made to fit your system paths. If you find yourself having troubles with this, there is a link in the description below that will lead you to the DCS forums where this is discussed in more detail, as well as some other useful information. With that done, let's go ahead and load the model viewer. To find the DCS model viewer, we will navigate to your DCS install directory /bin folder. I recommend creating a shortcut to the model viewer on your desktop or somewhere else that is easy to get to, as we will be using it quite frequently. Now with the model viewer open, let's find our model to load. This will be similar to how we found the livery folder names for our module. Go to File, Load Model. Newer models will be under your DCS install, Core Mods, Aircraft, the module you are working on, Shapes folder. And older models will be under your DCS install, Bazaar, World, Shapes folder. Within these locations, you will be looking for a .edm file. Generally, the one you want will be just the model name and will be quite large in size. In our example, it's the F-16C_BL50.edm. With our model now open, let's generate a description file by clicking on the Generate Livery File button. This will open a save dialog. Save the file to the custom livery folder you created earlier under the saved games directory. In my example, that would be the 421st FS Hill AFB folder. Now go ahead and close the model viewer and open the description file you just saved. As you can see, this file is quite a mess in its default state. I prefer to edit the file to make it a bit more user-friendly. Here's my description file after organizing it. Now we need to add some things to it as well. At the very bottom, we are going to add the name of the livery. Be sure that this is after the last bracket of the above code and that you use the proper syntax. You can also add a countries line that will define the countries that can use your livery. Usually I disable this, therefore making it available to all countries. With all that done, let's talk about how this file works. As you can see, each line has 4 sections. I have broken them into columns to make it a bit easier to follow along. The first column is the name of the texture as defined by the modeling program. You do not want to edit this value. The next column is the layer type of the layer. As you can see, we have many different types of layers, but for this tutorial we will mainly be working with the fuse layers. The third column is the name of the texture to be used. This is the file that DCS will be looking for within your livery folder. This can be edited to match your DDS file. And the final column is the true-false column DCS will look at to determine whether or not to look for the file within your livery folder. If set to false, DCS will look for the file, and if set to true, DCS will not look for a file, but instead will use its own file. We will be changing these values as we create texture files so that DCS will use our files. For now, we want all of these set to true, and then we will toggle them back to false as needed. This will make more sense once we start exporting our texture files. If you want to add the ability to texture the external fuel tanks or other items that attach to your module, you will have to add them as they are not included with the generated livery file. You could go into the model viewer and find the individual models just like we did with the aircraft, or you can find them in an existing description file within your DCS install. For this example, I will copy the fuel tanks and LAU-129 from the description file for the F-16. You might also note that the default description file is using roughness metallic instead of specular for the layer name. You can do another find and replace all specular instances with the roughness metallic in your description file. Specular is the old method that DCS used, and roughness metallic is the new one. I'll cover this more in my next video, where I will be talking solely about roughmet files. Once your description file is set up, ensure that it is saved in your new livery folder under Saved Games. In my case, I will make sure it is in the folder 421st FS Hill AFB. Okay, so now we have most of the tedious work done. Let's go find a texture template for our model. On the DCS website, you will find many texture templates available for download. Find the texture template for your model and download it. I recommend not saving this to your new livery folder, but instead somewhere else on your system. I have an entire folder set up for livery creation where I keep all my templates, reference images, and anything else related to skinning. Once downloaded, extract the files. In the case of the F-16 templates, all the file names end in _template. For ease of use, I'm going to rename all of these to remove the _template. Now when we export the files from our graphics editor, they will match the name in the description file, and it will slightly speed up the process. Now let's go ahead and open up one of these texture files. As you can see, these files are mostly organized, but not all templates will be. For now, we will not be creating complex textures, but instead we will just simply add a layer and fill it with a solid color. Now let's export the file as a DDS to the new livery folder we created earlier. This will bring up the NVIDIA Texture Tools window. If you are using a different plugin, you will have to do research on it to make sure that you have the right settings. As for the NVIDIA plugin, we don't need to change any of these settings for now. We will now do the same process for all texture template files we downloaded. Add a layer, fill it, and export the file. As you can see with this file, the color is not the same as the other template files we got. The reason for this is because it was saved in a different color format. There are a couple ways to work around this, but I find it the easiest to convert the file to the same color format we are using for the other files. This will vary in different programs, but the idea is to get it converted to the same RGB format the other files are using. In our example, it's the sRGB IEC 61966-2.1. When all the texture templates have been exported to your new livery folder, you should have something similar to what I have here. Now we need to edit our description file so that DCS will use the files we just exported. For DCS to see our texture files, we will need to ensure that the file name we exported matches the name in the description file, column 3, and that the true-false argument is set to false, column 4. Update your description file accordingly and save it when done. Now we can relaunch the model viewer. This time your model should be in File, Recent Files, so it will be a bit quicker to open. Open the Liveries tool by either using the Tools menu or pressing Ctrl L. The Liveries window will show a list of models on the left with corresponding liveries on the right. Find your model on the left side and you should see your custom livery in the list on the right. It will be the name you defined within the description file. Go ahead and load it, and if all has gone to plan, you should see the livery on your model. If you do not see the livery in the list, double check your description file, check your livery folder name, and verify that the model viewer autoexec.lua file has been modified as we covered earlier. One thing to note here, if you make changes to the description file, be sure to relaunch the model viewer in order for the changes to take effect. I have not found a way to work around this yet. Now let's talk about how the model viewer can help us while creating our textures. With the model viewer left open, go back to your graphics editor and make changes to your texture file. In this case, I'm just going to darken the layer we made earlier. Now export it to the new livery folder, overwriting the existing file. Once saved, go back to the model viewer and we will press the Reload Textures button. As you can see, this is a very quick way to see the changes on your texture. Also, it is a great way to find things on the model. You can add some text or a bright color to an area, export it, and reload the textures quickly to identify the area. Now it's time to create the entire skin. Being this process is quite long, we'll jump ahead to a set of textures that I have ready for the next step. If you'd like to see my process in creating the actual textures, let me know in the comments down below and I will consider doing a video on my process. So here is one of 4 liveries I made for the F-16 that are all based on Hill Air Force Base squadrons. I've added the tail art and removed all weathering to make it a bit easier to see the base texture. I did this for all template files and exported them to the livery folder. Let's look at them in the model viewer now. So it's looking pretty good, but as you can see, the BORT numbers are the wrong color. Let's create a custom BORT number file. The quickest way to do this is to find the BORT number in the textures box of the model viewer and press navigate. This will open the location of the file. Open this file in your graphics editor and save a copy of it. It is important not to edit the original file as it will affect other textures. Once you have a copy of this file saved, you can then edit it to the color you want and export it as a DDS to your livery folder. When you export it, you will most likely have to increase the compression quality to remove artifacting around the text. Usually this is only necessary on decals and BORT numbers, but also be aware that doing this will drastically increase export times. Let's do the same thing with a decal on the tail. We'll find it through the model viewer as we did with the BORT numbers, save a copy of it, making sure not to edit the original, and then edit it and export it to our livery folder. Once your files are exported, update the description file again by setting any instances of the BORT number and decal file being used to false. And remember that changes to the description file will require you to relaunch the model viewer. It might be hard to see with YouTube compression, but there is still a small white line around the decal file. I am going to export it once again and increase compression a little more. Now let's reload the textures. It's most likely not visible on YouTube, but that looks much better. The white lines are gone and the texture looks much cleaner. Let's talk about arguments now. We can see that there are multiple BORT numbers in different locations on our current model. There is a quick and easy way to set these via the description file with a custom argument section. This description file is the one that comes with the default livery for the F-16. I'm going to copy the custom arg section over to our description file. we can see that the arguments set here are 1000, 1001, 1002, and 1003. If we go back to the model viewer now, we can open the arguments tab and find these there. By adjusting the value of the argument, you can see how it changes either the position or the visibility of the different port numbers. Note that not all modules have the ability to do this, but if they do, they will most likely be different arguments and different things they affect. You'll have to do some testing to figure things out for different modules. For the livery I'm working on, I only want the tail port number visible, so I'm going to disable all the other arguments by setting them to 1. Once the description file is modified and saved, reload the model viewer and load the custom livery. As you can see, these port numbers will now be hidden when the livery is used. One final thing that I want to cover are objects that attach to the aircraft that you can also create custom skins for. In this example, we are going to do custom fuel tanks for the F-16. To find the default texture, we'll use the model viewer to load the 370-gallon fuel tank. Similar to how we found the port number texture, we will open the texture file for the fuel tank. As you can see in this folder, the 300-gallon fuel tank is here as well. We'll open both of these, save copies, being sure not to edit the originals, and then we can edit them and export them to our custom livery folder. A quick note, when you generate texture files in this way, they will not be templates. You will be creating the template from scratch, so it will usually take quite a bit more work to get it right. There are some templates out there that people have shared, and I will share mine once I am done with this tutorial series. Once your texture files have been edited and exported, update your description file. Now reload the model viewer. To view the textures, load the 370-gallon fuel tank, open the liveries tool, and apply your custom livery. As you can see, this fuel tank will now be textured when it is loaded on the aircraft. Let's also look at the 300-gallon tank and make sure that it's working as well. As you can see, it is in a different location than the 370-gallon tank. Sometimes you'll have to go to a different location to find the model you are looking for. As you can see though, our custom texture is working here as well. And with that, I'm going to wrap this video up. This tutorial is only part of the creation process, but it should be a good starting point if you are new to livery creation for DCS. I will be releasing another video that covers rough met files soon, so consider subscribing if you don't want to miss that. If you are having issues with any of the steps I did in this tutorial, be sure to double check the names and locations of files and folders. Also visit the Eagle Dynamics forums if you have more questions. There are some great discussions there about livery creation. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, please leave a like. Thanks for watching.